going to continue this discussion about buying and selling trucks. So, for me, I use a tool that I coined that's qualifying a buyer or seller. So let's start with a seller. And what do I mean by qualifying a seller? Let's go. Did I say buyer? Let's go with buyer. Let's qualifying a buyer. So what do I mean by that? You may have several people interested in buying your truck. That doesn't mean you're going to sell it to any of them, or even the first one or the second one. There's things that you would look for in a potential buyer. And there's some things that would be red flags that would to indicate to you that this guy is not serious, or this sale will never happen, or whatever. And you could filter your buyers based on your criteria that you created beforehand. Before you even listed your truck, you're like, for me to sell a truck to someone, they got to meet these 3 conditions, or maybe there's 5 conditions that you have. And I tell you, you may think that that's wasted opportunity, but the right buyer will meet all your criteria and make it very easy. And if they don't, then they're not the right buyer. They're a buyer, but they're not your buyer. So let me give you an example. You go to sell your truck, and the guy wants you to hold the truck for him. He's interested in your truck, but he can't buy it right now. He wants you to hold it until he can find financing. Well, that would be a red flag for me. That would be one of the things. He didn't meet my criteria as a potential buyer, because a serious buyer will already have the money arranged beforehand. Because when they go look for a truck, they're ready to pull the trigger. If they go out and look at trucks, they don't know if they're going to get approved for a loan. They will talk a big game. Oh, my credit's good. Oh, my bank is good. This, that, and the other. I'm going to take out a home equity loan. I could borrow money from so and so, and then they want you to hold the truck, and then here you are a week later. You got to call them. You're chasing them. They're not calling you, and you're wanting to know if they're successful in getting their financing. See, this isn't going to work, because they talked a big game, but then they didn't follow through. So, don't hold your truck just because someone's interested in it. Either they buy it or they don't. It's first come, first serve. So let's look at another criteria. You have a bill of sale that you want to have them sign and have it notarized, but they don't want to do that. Well, that's a red flag. They didn't meet one of my criteria that would qualify them as a buyer, and I would eliminate them from consideration. I don't know what their problem is. They don't want to go for a notary and create a legal document and have it signed. So, I think, you keep these criteria in mind. Just because someone's interested in your truck doesn't mean you're going to sell it to them. So we talked about financing. We talked about bill of sale. We talked about holding a truck. There's 3 things right there, that, are my criteria. I'm not holding the truck. You got to have the money, and you got to be willing to sign a bill of sale. Now, other things that I would look for is the guy making a ridiculously lowball offer? That should be a red flag. I mean, if you got the truck listed for 50 and they're only offering you 25, just forget it. That guy is looking, to take advantage of someone who's desperate to sell the truck. And he's not going to be a serious buyer. It's okay for someone to make you an offer that's a little less than what you're asking. You're asking 50, they offer you 45. Maybe you split the difference and you sell it at 47. Something like that. Perfectly normal. But if they come in at lowball offer, you just realize they're not meeting one of your criteria to be considered a serious buyer. So, you create a list of what it is that you need and you want. Maybe one of your criteria is that you're going to go with them to their bank when they get the cashier's check, so you can witness that that's a legitimate check, you know, and you're not going to take that check until you're in front of the notary and you get that bill of sale notarized, and then you transfer the bill of sale. Each of you will have a copy of it, and then that's when you get the check, and then you give them the keys, you know. So you could do that. If they don't want to do that, that's a red flag. They didn't meet one of your criteria. They're not meeting your qualifications for a potential buyer. So these are things that I look for in a buyer, you know. And it's a tricky thing, you know, because you really would like to sell it, but you got to protect yourself at the same time, you know, and realize that just because this is the first guy that called on your truck doesn't mean it's the guy you're going to sell it to. You know, it's probably going to be the third or fourth guy who makes you an offer that is the one that's the real buyer. You know, other guys, you know, want to buy the truck, they can't get financing. They want to buy the truck, but you got to hold the truck until they sell their truck. You know, that's not going to work. You know, and the list of things go on and on and on and on. The right buyer will meet all your criteria to buy the truck. You know, it's not, you're not selling it to just anybody. You know, not that you wouldn't sell it to just anybody, but they got to meet your criteria. You know, they got to do these certain things in order for you to protect your interests to complete the sale successfully. So when you are buying a truck from someone, it's very similar. You just flip it around. You're buying the truck, okay? Does the guy want to show you maintenance records? You know, now you got to qualify the seller. You know, does the guy have maintenance records? Nope. Well, that may not meet one of your criteria. It might be a red flag. It says, well, you know, I'm interested in the truck, but there's no maintenance records. You know, so that may eliminate that truck from consideration. Is there a warranty? Nope. Well, there's another criteria that wasn't met. Is there going to be a bill of sale that's notarized? Nope. You know, not willing to go in front of a notary. Didn't meet your criteria. You know, you made a good offer, not full asking price, but the guy won't budge. That might be a red flag. It's not meeting your criteria. The guy's not willing to negotiate on price. You know, so you could create a list of 4 or 5 things or more of what you're looking for when you're buying and selling trucks. And this will help you filter through the number of trucks that are available, and if you're buying, and the number of buyers that are available if you're selling. Because it can be, you know, a little tricky. You know, it's like, look, I don't mind selling my truck, but I don't want to get robbed in the process. You know, so, you know, I always create a list of criteria, and I stand by my criteria, because, you know, just because you didn't get a phone call this week, you might get 5 phone calls the next week. You know, it's just, you got to have a little bit of patience. You got to do a little bit of marketing. You know, put your truck on Facebook, put your truck on truckpaper.com. You know, put a for sale sign in your truck, park it in a highly visible area, you know, so that people know that your truck is for sale. And you're generating leads, and you know, you don't want to be chasing buyers. They should be chasing you. You know, they should be wanting to buy your truck. And if they're not, then there's probably a reason why they don't want to buy your truck. It's because you may have the price too high. You know, that's not uncommon. You know, that's something you got to feel your way through. You may start out initially, the price of your truck is too high. You're not getting any bites. You're not getting anyone interested in it. You know, there may be things where maybe you're not offering a warranty, and other trucks have warranties. You know, that's something you got to think about. That may cause you to lower the price. You know, maybe your truck doesn't have features that other trucks do. That may cause you to lower price. So you got to think about putting yourself in the other person's shoes and say, okay, what would a potential buyer, why would they be interested in buying my truck? And same thing when you're buying a truck, what would a potential seller look for in a buyer? You know, as a buyer of the truck, Do you have good credit? Are you pre-financed? Do you have the money ready to go? You're willing to sign a bill of sale? You're willing to go get it notarized? You're willing to complete the sale in a timely manner. You're not going to put the guy on hold or ask him to hold the truck for you. You can't do that. So no one's going to wait, for you to go find financing. So you need to get that arranged ahead of time. So these are things that I look for when we think about, qualifying candidates for potential buyers or potential sellers. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.